Do you ever give Robert Downey Jr. shit for not pulling you into the MCU yet? Does that ever, as a guy who's done a lot of interviews, what's one question you always get asked that you low key hope no one ever asks again?
Does the Breakfast Club hang out together socially every week?
You don't have like a group text or something?
No, no, isn't that funny? 40 years later? No, it's so funny. I was just with the gang, or three of the gang. We were doing MegaCon in Orlando. That interview question is funny. Probably something John Hughes related, but I'm always honored to talk about him and the work. I wouldn't be here without him, so I'm cool with it.
Did you read Persuader to get a deeper understanding of Zachary Beck, or do you prefer to develop him solely from the script?
Great question. I did. I once I got the job, I did read the novel, and I really liked it. And I have to say, Nick Santor, our showrunner, great guy, who gave me this opportunity along with Amazon Prime. I want to salute them for this. In the world of Lee Child and Reacher, that this is a beloved and a favored book in the Reacher series. So to your question, Chris, yes, I did use the book. I kept it with me on set. Just kind of looking to get details and to get a sense of how Lee wrote. And yeah, it was with me actually all the time. But I was also
Nice.
really impressed too how dedicated they were to really being true to the novel.
Now, outside of the novel itself or your own experience as a dad, were there any specific influences from real life or fiction that you pulled from to sort of shape Zachary Beck's character?
I use music a lot, to be very honest with you, to kind of contextualize what I'm doing. And so, depending on the parameters of the scene and what's needed, I'm a big jazz fan. So, I think I use and work with music. Or it could be anything from Led Zeppelin to hip hop to jazz. And one of the things I learned as an actor years ago, Chris, it was from a great acting coach named Bob McAndrew. And he taught me as a technique that can be explored. He said, any thought that you have about any person, actor that you're working with, male or female, give it to your character, which is a really interesting note. So sometimes I employ that trick, how a person makes me feel. I
Mhm.
kind of save it for the lens in a way.
Did you ever get a chance to arm wrestle Alan Ritchson on set?
I thought about this, during the making of that show, man, it was great to see he and also Olivier, well, they were working out. I was eating out. So I think that was my workout for this.
I work for Comic Book, so I want to ask you a couple of questions
Sure,
about some
man.
of your other works. And in your career, you've been murdered off by the likes of Edward Scissorhands and Michael Myers. So I was curious, which on-screen death do you take the most pride in?
Well, I took it in the gut in scissor hands.
And you got plunged out a window.
I was just going to say, and there was a nice stunt there. There's a little bit of movie magic. Let me just sidebar on that for a second. It's really funny because when I'm fighting Johnny Depp, we were at 20th Century Fox and we were on a stage for that rooftop, which was incredible. And then when I fell out the window, it was my stunt double in Tampa. So that's Hollywood right there. But Johnny, yeah, Johnny sliced and diced me there. I have to give it up to Mike Myers. I got to say, Chris, of all in my long career, it's 49 years to count, thank God. I don't think I've ever been more excited about a film's release as I was with Halloween Kills. And what happened is, if you recall, they delayed the release from 2019 to 2020
Mhm.
for reasons that are beyond me. But um, so in that year, I really plugged in online to all the fan sites and all the review shows, and I really got a deeper sense of how loyal and hardcore that horror audience is, as you know. And I think in the context of horror films, Halloween is like the Star Wars of horror, right?
Mhm.
So to your question, I would say the Michael Myers death was pretty cool, and that's the one I was, I think, the most excited about. And again, like that film was just an incredible experience for me, Chris. I've always admired David Gordon Green.
Do you ever
So
get tired of nerds like me telling you that The Dark Knight is the greatest comic book movie ever made?
maybe we could supplant that as that first question. No, listen, I love it, man. I'm a nerd for that film too. There's another one. There's a franchise that, I mean, in the 70s, I was watching that cartoon. This is before you had gotten nerds. I was a kid in the 70s that loved that, and I love the old Batman series. It meant so much to me to be a part of that film. I loved it. I remember I just finished doing the Dead Zone. I flew right to London, and I had auditioned for Nolan and his wife, Emma Nolan, at Warner's, and like months had gone by. I didn't think I was going to get the part. And all of a sudden, they surprised me. And it was really great. I just finished my fifth season of the show, flew right to London, and started work on that. No, man, to this day, I feel so blessed that I was a part of that film. I really do. It was really a fantastic fantastic project. And to get to work and be in proximity to people that I admire, like Gary Oldman, just great actors. Christian Bale too. I mean, I have nothing but respect for he and Heath Ledger. They were really and are phenomenal actors,
Well, what I
and
wanted to
stand-up
ask you
guys.
about it
Yeah.
was, Christopher Nolan is known for his very methodical directing style, and
Mm.
obviously he's considered one of the greats now. But, you also had a scene with Heath Ledger where he took the reins behind the camera. And so I was just curious about what was the biggest difference you noticed between working under both of them as directors.
Well, I have a story for that. That's great. So we were shooting. Oh, great question. We were shooting at Cardington, which was a former military base in England that had been, sort of morphed into the studio. And I remember that day we were sitting out there for half the day went by, and this was a $200 million production. So there was 18 trucks and there's a couple hundred people on set. And I remember I was getting really frustrated and I was, just antsy to get to work and start the process. So I came out of my trailer and Heath was walking somewhere, and I just blurted out something like out of frustration, like, "When the hell are we going to do this, right?" And he walked by me and went, "I can't work like this." He was clearly mocking me in the moment, like, "Just shut
Yeah.
up. We're doing a Batman movie the way." But he was a cool guy. So about a half hour later, the ADs came up to me and they told me what you back to your question. They said, "Well, Heath's going to direct this. We're going to go up and block the rehearsal now for the scene where he kidnaps you." And it was in that moment that I learned, to your question, what was going to happen. He said, "Well, Heath's going to direct this. Chris is on main unit doing something else." And so what happened was we were paired with the stunt team. They hung me upside down. And then it was just an old handheld camcorder. And Heath was just kind of going in and out and getting the footage that he got. And I don't think there were many notes involved. He stayed so in character in that film. It was very impressive. Except when I'd seen him in the trailer and in the mornings, he'd have like a beanie hat on, he'd be listening to some tunes. He had the feeling of like a surfer. He was an Australian kid that was like just really cool. And what a great artist he was. With Nolan, I felt like I was working with the Pied Piper, and I meant that fully respectfully. He was brilliant. Some takes, I'm sure you've heard this detailed, but some scenes he'd have 6, 8 cameras going. Very specific, always knew where he wanted to put the lens. Um, you know, Very much a British gentleman, so there's a big interior there. He's very calm,
Mhm.
very very interesting guy. Every day he kind of wore the same thing. He almost, very eccentric in that way. He would wear like a dress shirt, he had a vest, and he had like this long coat on. It's almost like Steve Jobs wearing a black t-shirt every day. That was his uniform. But as a director, I can tell you, he also has a sense of humor. He loves to laugh, and he's a great guy, very well spoken, very soft spoken, but just brilliant. And I remember I was on set thinking at the time, Chris, I keep looking over him, and I'm like, this guy, he just felt like such an old soul to me. And at the time, I think I was 38 or 39. It turns out I think he was a year or two younger than me. But when I would look at this guy on the set, I mean, I had the respect and the reverence for him of like, it just felt like Hitchcock or something. I mean, obviously, I had great respect for his brain and who he is as an artist, but he's just a very interesting soul, and has a big presence himself. He's got a lot of presence as a person.
I watched the Peacock documentary episode on it. I loved it. Your SNL season, obviously remembered as one of the most infamous of all time. Do you remember the moment that you knew that like I'm not coming back next season? Was there like a specific moment that happened for you?
It was interesting. I was shooting on another project, which I can't discuss. It's a very exciting one. It's a global hit show. It's forthcoming. And I was overseas in Europe, and I happened to get a call from a woman named Layla Nabolsi. Layla was an executive producer working with Warren in 1985, and she was very much responsible for me being cast in the show. I've recently found out. So Layla reconnected with me about the opportunity here, and I had heard from my team, about it as well some months before, but I wasn't sure about it. I was kind of beating myself up about the show. Like it wasn't a great season. It was all those years ago. And it was through that conversation with Layla and Morgan and his team sending me all the 1985 episodes that after my call with Layla, I watched them all. And I got to tell you, Chris, it was like It's a Wonderful Life kind of, it was like a life of you. I'm going, lighten up, man. I mean, who cares if there were some bad episodes or if it was a bit of a corny season? Who gives a shit? It's 50 years later. You were in the 11th season. And, again, I felt like George Billy. It was like a look down memory lane. In that year, Chris, I never watched the episodes because I was a kid just stressed with the dealing with the show and doing the work. And I was still a
Yeah.
kid. So I think over time, I think I just beat myself up about it. Like
Right.
I
Yeah.
wasn't a breakout star and I didn't do this and I didn't do that. And all that went away, Chris, when I watched the episodes and I talked to Leia. So I wound up doing the interview. And I got to tell you, it was really a gift because I was like, you know what? I'm just so happy and proud of the fact that I was a part of that.
Oh, do you ever give Robert Downey Jr. for not pulling you into the MCU yet? Does that ever?
And I did in the interview. Did you see that? I had the line in there. Um, it's cool, man. You know what? I've really learned over time, Chris, that I think the healthiest mindset and attitude is just you got to wish everybody success, you know. And I'm not bitter about any of that stuff. I really am not. You know, it would be fun to do one of those films, but I'm not sweating it. You know, I'm grateful for what I've been given, and I think for me, and it kind of hinges and connects to what we just spoke of with SNL. You know, the gift for me is I've had a 49-year career. My career is almost as long as the SNL run, you know, and that's amazing to me. So back 1976, I worked with Steve Allen in a play, right? And that's the sort of beginning of the timeline. And then I was just a kid, man. It was like a hobby. I was auditioning for commercials. I did commercials. And then I started getting some film roles as a young teenager. I was 13. I did this movie Six Pack with Kenny Rogers for Fox. And that led to me getting National Lampoon's Vacation, which led to my introduction to John Hughes. So to me, that's one thing I want to go on record as saying. I thank God for all my blessings, everything that I've been a part of. And that's really the gift for me. That's the takeaway.
But as somebody who's had a 49-year career and you've worked with so many icons over the years, who's someone that you've worked with or met that you remember just genuinely being starstruck by?
I would say Mr. Brad Pitt. I did this film Netflix with him back in 2015. They didn't release the picture until 2017 for I think some political reasons. They were waiting out the election period at that time. But I was really honored to work with Brad, you know. And the trippiest part is when we get on set, you know, he winds up pulling me aside one day. He's like, Mike, I was watching you in college with my buddies, you know. And we're, you know, he's a little bit older than me. So I was really excited to work with Brad. I was really proud of that film. Um, and I really enjoyed getting to know him. He's a real stand-up guy.
Mike, thank you so much for your time, sir. I could listen
You
to your
too.
stories for hours, so I
I
appreciate
appreciate
this,
it.
man. Hopefully, we'll get a chance to do this again sometime soon.
My pleasure, buddy. Good seeing you, pal.